a famous recipe, a ruined dessert, and a murder no one saw coming. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Don't be shy. Drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Your words always make my day. Let's get into it. It was one of those Tuesday mornings when the air in the brownstones' kitchen was laced with the scent of Meyer lemon and contempt. Fritz was test-driving a new soufflé variation which, judging by Wolfe's arched brow, had already failed to rise to the occasion, literally and metaphorically. Wolfe naturally hadn't said a word. He just pushed the plate 2 inches to the left, as if the failure might correct itself if placed at the right angle. Now, I'm not the type to wax philosophical about food, but you learn a few things when you've spent years watching a 280-pound man treat eggs with more reverence than most people treat their grandmothers. So when the bell rang and Wolfe didn't blink, I knew it wasn't the soufflé that had spoiled his mood. It was what or who was about to come through that door. I swung the front door open to find a woman in her mid-30s standing with one heel dug into the stoop like she owned it, and a brown paper bag clutched in both hands like it might explode. Her coat was tailored, her lipstick war paint, and her glare was something between panic and professional politeness. "Archie Goodwin," she asked, like she wasn't sure if I was going to solve her problem or make it worse. Guilty, though not often convicted. "Come in." She stepped inside and followed me to the office, moving like someone trying not to let the smell of fear show through her Chanel No. 5. Wolfe didn't rise. Of course not. He looked at her, looked at the bag, and then looked at the spot on his desk that would normally hold it if she knew the rules. She didn't. She hesitated. "Miss," I said helpfully, "it's customary to surrender any mystery packages before we discuss your woes. You'll find Wolfe's hospitality improves when explosions are ruled out." She placed the bag on the desk. Wolfe stared at it like it was a puzzle he'd already solved, but was too annoyed to enjoy. "My name is Olivia Marston," she said. "I'm the executive sous-chef at Pommes et Poivre." That explained the scent. Pommes et Poivre was Manhattan's latest playground for the ambitious and culinarily deranged. The kind of place where dishes came with backstories and chefs came with enemies. "And what," Wolfe said, finally moving a muscle, his lip, "is your grievance, Miss Marston?" She opened the bag, pulled out a small ceramic ramekin with a deflated golden rim, and placed it on his desk like she was offering a dead pet for autopsy. "That," she said, "was supposed to win us a Michelin star." Wolfe didn't touch it, he just sniffed once. "And it failed." "It sank," she said. "But not because of my recipe. I believe it was sabotaged." I raised an eyebrow. "You want us to solve a kitchen accident?" "I want you to find out who deliberately ruined it, and why." Wolfe gave her a long, cool look. "Sabotage, Miss Marston, is a serious accusation. So is ego." She didn't flinch. "Then let me put it plainly. I think someone in our kitchen tampered with the eggs. I also think it wasn't about the soufflé, it was a message. A culinary vendetta," I said. "New York's cutthroat cooking scene delivers again." She nodded. "And if I'm right, it won't stop at sunken. Eggs, it'll escalate." Wolfe grunted. I could tell he wasn't sold, not yet. But he hadn't dismissed her either, which meant something about this woman or the story had scratched a mental itch. "Who else knows you're here?" he asked. "No one." "Good." He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with the clarity of someone already plotting 8 moves ahead. "I dislike restaurants," he said. "They are noisy, unpredictable, and full of false performance." "I'm aware," she said. "I came because I know you prefer things done correctly. Someone's disrupting excellence for their own reasons. And I thought, perhaps, you'd want to correct that." That was it. She had spoken his language, not law, not justice, but precision. Excellence corrupted. Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, get the details. Names, roles, relationships, then escort Miss Marston out." I did, of course, and as I jotted down her list of colleagues, head chef Roland Brousseau, pastry prodigy Danny Kwan, inventory manager Anya Terikoff, and investor/dining room tyrant Lucien Bray, I noticed her hands trembled just slightly when she mentioned Lucien. Back in the office, Wolfe hadn't touched the ramekin, but when I returned, he was peering at it with something approaching disgust. "Would you eat that?" he asked. "Only under duress," I said. "Precisely." He leaned back. "There's something off about this." "You mean the eggs?" "I mean the woman. And the timing will begin, but not with soufflés. Where then? With the people who benefit when excellence collapses, he said. Find them, Archie. And with that, the case was on. Not with a bang, but a whimper. Or in this case, a very suspicious sag in a supposedly perfect soufflé. The thing about New York kitchens, the real ones, not the ones you see on TV, is they hum like pressure cookers strapped to a ticking bomb. You've got flames, knives, egos, and everyone's one comment away from a breakdown. I walked into Pommes et Poivre that same evening with my tie loosened and my grin fixed. But behind the smirk, I was watching every glance, every knife grip, every flicker of resentment that might pass as teamwork. The place itself was all polished steel and calculated chaos. Waitstaff brushed past with ghostly efficiency, sommeliers hovered with the charm of trained assassins, and in the far end of the open kitchen stood a man with a face like carved granite and a toque tall enough to double as an antenna. That was Roland Brousseau, the head chef, god of the flame and likely suspect number one in Olivia Marston's culinary opera of Sabotage. I approached under the guise of curiosity and charm, introduced myself as a food writer, shadowing Olivia for a profile, and got the kind of half-smile chefs reserve for food critics and rodents. She said nothing to me, he muttered, slicing shallots with a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the kitchen. Spontaneity, I offered. Very in vogue. He didn't stop chopping. We don't do vogue here, we do excellence, or we don't serve at all. A high bar. Shame about the soufflé. That got a pause. Not long, maybe half a beat, but it was there. He resumed chopping like the onion had offended him. She claims sabotage. I shrugged. Off the record, she thinks someone's got an agenda. You got a theory? His knife stopped again. This time he looked up. The only agenda in this kitchen is to stay open. Investors are breathing down our necks. We lose a star. We lose everything. She knows that. Could be someone wants that, I said. A competitor, an inside grudge. You think we have time for grudges? His voice went tight. This isn't a soap opera, Mr. Goodwin. Funny, I said. It feels like one. Before he could answer, someone behind me let out a laugh. A short, musical, almost mocking sound. I turned to see a young man with a mop of glossy hair and a grin that said he'd broken rules and gotten away with it. That's Danny, Roland said, as if introducing a particularly stubborn fungus. Pastry, Danny offered, wiping his hands on a towel. And comic relief, apparently. I heard about the egg incident, I said. You were the one who prepared them? Danny gave a small theatrical bow. Guilty as charged, but I measure everything to the gram. My eggs don't misbehave, unless told to. So someone told them? He shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time someone's tried to send a message in the kitchen. It's easier than facing someone in the alley. Is that common here? Messages? Danny leaned in, slightly dropping the grin. You've got 4 people who want the top spot and 1 seat at the summit. Add nerves, money, and too much pride mean... And yes, things happen. It was about as close to a confession as I was going to get in a kitchen full of ears, so I pivoted. You think Olivia's the real target? Danny didn't answer immediately. Then he gave a nod, barely perceptible. She runs the show behind the curtain. Roland hates that. But he needs her. We all do. Except Lucien Bray, a voice said behind me. I turned. A tall woman with Slavic cheekbones and a clipboard for a soul stood watching us. She wore the expression of someone who'd seen too much inventory and not enough thanks. Anya Terekov, she said, not waiting for a question. I manage everything this place forgets to appreciate, including the cost of ruined eggs. I offered my hand. She took it like a burden. You mentioned Lucien? I asked. She nodded. The investor. He thinks we're replaceable. All of us. Olivia threatens him because she makes herself irreplaceable. That soufflé wasn't just food, it was her claim to permanence. And someone pulled the rug out from under it. Someone, she said, wanted to remind her the rug can move. Where do you stand in all this? I asked. She glanced at Danny, then at Roland, then back at me. I stand where the power is, and I don't like watching it wasted. That, coming from someone who catalogues capers and invoices vinegar, sounded a lot like strategy. Before I could press further, I spotted the one name I hadn't met, Lucien Bray himself, sweeping into the dining area like a theatre critic preparing to hate the show. He was sleek, silver, and wore success like cologne. The waiters stiffened. The chefs looked away. Olivia hadn't exaggerated. He didn't just own part of the restaurant, he owned the fear. I intercepted him before he made it to the VIP table. "Mr. Bray," I said, extending a hand. "Archie Goodwin. I'm profiling the chef team." His eyes scanned me like a stock portfolio. "Unexpected," he said. "She should have cleared it." "She likes surprises." He gave a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "So do I. When they benefit me." "Do sabotaged soufflés benefit?" "You?" He stopped mid-stride. "Excuse me?" Olivia seems to think someone had an agenda, someone who wouldn't mind reminding her who signs the checks. His smile turned to ice. "Tell your readers this. No one is irreplaceable in this business. Excellence isn't a right. It's a lease, and some people forget when the rent's due." He left me standing there with the scent of citrus and veiled threats lingering in the air. Back at the brownstone that night, Wolfe was reading The Oxford Companion to Food like it contained wartime secrets. I laid out what I'd learned. Roland's resentment, Danny's smirk, Anya's angles, and Lucien's venom. When I finished, he didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "Someone tampered with the eggs, not because they hate soufflé, because they hate success that isn't theirs." Nodded. "Lucien seems the obvious candidate. But Roland has ego, Danny has flair, Anya has ambition." "Everyone had a motive," Wolfe said, "but who had access and subtlety?" "Danny," I said. "He admitted he prepped the eggs." "But Olivia trusted him," Wolfe replied. "Would she delegate that task if she suspected him?" "Unless she was watching someone else." Wolfe tapped his fingers on the armrest. "Miss Marston must return and bring the ingredient list. You think it's not just sabotage?" "I think it's a message wrapped in a recipe, and someone in that kitchen speaks fluent threat, which meant I'd be seeing Olivia again, and this time it wouldn't be for a taste test." The soufflé hadn't just sunk, it had whispered, and Wolfe wanted to hear what came next. Olivia Marston returned to the brownstone the next afternoon, looking sharper than the first time, which was impressive considering the nerves she'd been nursing. She came armed with a brown leather notebook, 2 ingredient invoices, and a face that could curdle cream. Fritz let her in with a nod, and I brought her to the office, where Wolfe hadn't moved from his orchid chair except to eat, and only then under protest. She laid out her notes with the solemnity of a priestess preparing a sacrifice. "These are the measurements, suppliers, substitutions, and kitchen assignments for the past 5 soufflés, including the one that failed." Wolfe didn't reach for them. He simply looked at her, his eyes narrowing as if he was measuring something invisible. "You believe this list will identify the saboteur?" "I believe," she said, "that whoever tampered with the ingredients did so through a change too. Subtle to notice unless you compare patterns." I took the papers, gave them a glance, then passed them to Wolfe, who still didn't move. "I will need Fritz," he said. Fritz arrived within 60 seconds. He must have been eavesdropping in the hall and took the sheets like they were state secrets. Wolfe instructed him to test each recipe as written side by side for texture, elevation, and collapse resistance. No spices, no plating, just the basics. That would keep the kitchen humming for a while. When Olivia left, after Wolfe assured her she would not be updated until it suited him, I followed her out to the stoop. "Tell me straight," I said. "Who do you think did it?" She looked at me, lips pressed into a tight line. "I've worked with all of them for years. I could give you reasons for any one of them. That's why I came to you. I don't want guesses. I want truth." "Back?" Inside, Wolfe grunted. "She's not lying." "No," I said. "She's just managing, like someone who knows she's not supposed to be winning and is scared someone's going to enforce that rule." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Then we shall determine who considers her success intolerable." That night, Fritz conducted his first round of culinary tests. I've seen Wolfe's kitchen used for everything from beer mustard evaluations to pâté tasting contests, but nothing gets him twitchier than soufflé science. 3 batches, identical. On paper, collapsed in 3 different ways. Fritz stood at the threshold of the office after the 3rd round, apron dotted with flour like it had been snowed on. "One of the eggs is not like the others," he said. Wolfe looked up. "Define." "Not like Different protein structure, less binding, but only by the barest margin. Not enough for a novice to notice, enough for collapse. I frowned. So someone tampered with the eggs before they even hit the bowl. Or, Fritz said, they swapped the batch. Eggs marked for omelettes used instead. Low-grade stock. Wolfe nodded slowly. Thank you, Fritz. When Fritz left, Wolfe turned to me. Find out who controls egg inventory at Pommes et Poivre and how often substitutions are allowed. I made the call that morning, pretending to be a culinary supplier trying to update a shipment cycle. Anya Terekov picked up, her voice clipped, and her patience already half gone. Yes, I manage perishables, she said. No, you can't alter quantities without a full review. And yes, substitutions happen, but not without my signature. Who's allowed to request them? I asked, gently nudging the script. Anyone can ask, only I approve. And who would benefit from switching egg quality? She paused. Then, no one, unless you're cooking for sabotage. I thanked her, hung up, and relayed the conversation to Wolfe. He wasn't surprised. She wouldn't risk her job over a grudge, I said. No, Wolfe replied, but she would exploit a system already vulnerable. Perhaps she allowed someone else to make the change, knowing it wouldn't be traced back. Someone she wouldn't mind watching fall. Wolfe nodded. We'll test her. Bring her in. Called the restaurant. Said Wolfe had a few refinements to discuss about the data she'd shared. She arrived the next afternoon in a slate suit and a gaze set on kill. Mr. Wolfe, she said, nodding. You summoned? I did, Wolfe replied. You manage the kitchen's integrity. She tilted her head. Is that a question or a compliment? An observation. Do you know the quality ratings of your egg shipments? She blinked once. Of course, I track them. Why? Then you would also know, Wolfe continued, when a lower-grade batch was used in place of premium stock. Yes? Her lips parted but didn't form words. I stepped in. There was a substitution the jour de the soufflé Sank. Impossible. Fritz tested the identical recipe with all other batch variants. Only one failed with the same collapse pattern. Guess which one? Anya didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her posture said it all. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Did someone request the substitution, or did you permit it under pressure? She clenched her jaw. I don't take pressure. But? Wolfe prompted. She exhaled through her nose. Danny flagged the inventory as low, said we'd be cutting close for evening service, suggested using an auxiliary crate marked for staff meals. He said Olivia approved. She didn't? Apparently not, she admitted, and I should have checked, but I was busy. Bray. I was breathing down my neck about margins. Margins that improve, Wolfe said. If Olivia's performance stumbles, she stiffened. I'm not his pawn. No, Wolfe said, but you may be his lever. She stood, furious now. If you think I sabotaged that dish, I don't, Wolfe interrupted. But you opened the door, and someone walked through it. When she stormed out, Wolfe didn't even look up. He just said, We're close. Someone's reckless. That means they're afraid. I nodded. Which makes them sloppy. He gave me the faintest hint of a smile. Exactly. Time to turn up the heat. By the following morning, the brownstone's calm had given way to calculated motion. Wolfe, who rarely leaves his chair unless his life or lunch is at risk, had turned his attention entirely to the soufflé, or rather, to what had been done to it. He had Fritz run 2 more test batches, both with perfect ingredients but under different temperature controls. The point wasn't to recreate the crime, it was to isolate motive from method. And as Wolfe put it, if a man intends collapse, he'll use the cleanest instrument to cause it. That was his way of saying the saboteur had used something invisible. I had another job. Wolfe handed me a list of names and times and told me, with his usual delicacy, go sniff, make them sweat. Like an omelette? I asked. Like an accusation. Without words, he said. First stop, Danny Kwan, pastry king with a flair for drama and a habit of smirking when he should have been sweating. He was doing prep in the side kitchen when I found him, kneading something that looked like it might take flight if it had a tail. Back again? He asked without looking up. People are starting to think you're the health inspector. Just trying to determine who has egg on their face. He grinned, but it was tighter this time. So what's the theory? That I sabotaged Olivia because I want her job? Not a theory yet, I said. Just a collection of circumstances. You flagged the egg supply, didn't you? He hesitated just a beat and then nodded. Yeah, the stock was low and we needed clean output for the evening. That's standard. You also suggested using the auxiliary crate. He wiped his hands and turned to face me. Sure, it's labeled stuff, but it's the same supplier. I've used it before. No one's ever flopped from it, except this time. I didn't know they were different. Anya said you told her Olivia approved it. He frowned. I said she wouldn't mind. I didn't lie. I guessed. Bad guess, I said. And convenient timing. He dropped his arms. You think I did this on purpose? I think you benefit if she takes a fall. You get attention, maybe a promotion. He stepped in a little closer. And maybe I just made a mistake. Ever think of that? Every day, I said. But mistakes usually don't hide themselves so neatly. He looked like he wanted to throw a ladle at me, but remembered he was on camera. I left him to his dough and headed for my next stop, Roland Brousseau. The head chef was carving trout like it had personally insulted his ancestors. You again, he said. What now? I've got a soufflé that collapsed and a timeline that doesn't make sense. Then you're starting to see the real picture, meaning... He tossed a sprig of rosemary aside like it had betrayed him. Olivia overreaches. She wants control of everything. Ingredients, plating, hiring. I run the kitchen, but she acts like it's hers. Couldn't it be both? I asked. You and her. Symbiotic. I don't do symbiotic, he said. I do command. Then why keep her around? Because Lucienne insists. Investors like her flair. But flair doesn't cook food. Fair, I said. But if she falls flat, you get your kitchen back. He slammed the knife down, deliberately but not theatrically. If I wanted her gone, I'd fire her, not foul a dish. Except you can't fire her. Lucien won't allow it. He stared at me, jaw clenched. That was all the answer I needed. Back at the brownstone, I gave Wolfe the update while Fritz prepped lunch. Pork chops with tarragon and a mushroom glaze. Wolfe was only half listening, which meant he was listening entirely, just in a different room of his brain. You're circling, he said as he cut into the chop. Danny flinches, Roland fumes, but neither fits. I raised a brow. How do you figure? Because sabotage requires stealth, he said, and both men are hammers. This act required a scalpel. Anya? She permitted the change. Yes, but even she claims ignorance of the egg quality. Then who? Wolfe finished chewing, dabbed his lips and said, Bray. Lucien? I scoffed. He doesn't cook, he barely eats. True, Wolfe said. But he controls, and he manipulates. What if the sabotage wasn't about the soufflé at all? I paused. Go on. What if it was a warning? Not to Olivia, to someone else. I leaned back. You think Lucien wanted Olivia shaken, not sunk? Yes, Wolfe said. And he used the soufflé as leverage, perhaps to pressure her, or someone close to her. And who would that be? He closed his eyes. We'll need to invite him. Push. I picked up the phone and dialed Bray's office. He answered himself, which surprised me. Most men with his arrogance prefer secretaries. This is Goodwin, I said. Wolfe requests a brief conversation, at his convenience, of course. Lucien gave a short laugh. Wolfe doesn't do brief. Neither do soufflés, I said. And yet, they collapse in seconds. He arrived that evening dressed like he was stepping onto a stage. Grey suit, silk tie, eyes that glinted with habitually withheld truth. Wolfe didn't greet him, just gestured toward the red chair across from his desk. I trust this isn't about catering, Bray said, settling in. It is about control, Wolfe said, which you seem to value, Bray smirked. Is this where you accuse me of egg tampering? No, Wolfe said. This is where I accuse you of using your staff as pawns in a game they didn't know they were playing. Bray crossed his legs. Do explain. You applied pressure, Wolfe said. Not to Olivia directly, but to the structure around her, Anya, the budget, the timelines. Eventually someone makes a decision that looks practical, but causes collapse. Bray didn't flinch. If they're that fragile, they don't belong in the kitchen. And yet you want the restaurant to survive. I want it profitable. Wolfe steepled his fingers. What did Olivia refuse? That got him. A flicker of hesitation, almost invisible. Then, she declined to sign a revised vendor agreement. Higher margins, lower supply cost. She said it would compromise quality. Which it did, Wolfe said. Conveniently. Bray stood. You have no proof. I have facts, Wolfe said calmly. You created a scenario where sabotage was inevitable, and then you let it happen. Which makes me what? The villain. No, Wolfe said. Just the match. Someone else struck it. Bray left without another word, but I could tell from the stiffness in his walk that something had hit home. After the door shut, Wolfe said, We've narrowed it. Someone used Bray's pressure to settle their own score. We must identify who lit the fire while hiding behind his smoke. And they'll be nervous now, I said, because they know the kitchen's too hot. Wolfe nodded. Which means they'll make another mistake, and this time we'll be ready. When I stepped back into Pommes et Poivre the next morning, the atmosphere had shifted, not in the thunder and lightning sense, but in that quiet, uneasy way a room changes after. Someone's found a hidden drawer. The tension didn't hang, it hovered. Olivia was at the pass directing the plating with clipped precision. Danny's usual smirk was missing, replaced with something unreadable. Anya was nowhere in sight. And Roland, well, Roland looked ready to bite through a ladle. I didn't need Wolfe's orchids to tell me the place was a mess beneath the polish. The soufflé sabotage had done more than deflate a dish. It had punctured whatever uneasy truce held this kitchen together. And now the seams were showing. I did a slow lap through the dining floor, noted Lucien Bray seated near the back, with a woman too young and too disinterested to be a client. He saw me, and his smile said, I'm still in charge. I gave him the kind of nod that said, not for long. Back in the kitchen, I found Danny stacking ramekins with more aggression than ceramics deserved. We're testing a new brunch lineup, he said without being asked. Apparently soufflés are off the table. Not surprised, I said. They've been known to sink reputations. He didn't smile. I know what people are saying, that I made the switch, that I had it in for Olivia. I've heard worse theories, I said. But here's what's strange. Someone went through a lot of trouble to collapse her career without taking the credit, and I'm guessing it wasn't you. He glanced at me, lips twitching. Then who was it? Roland. He doesn't play that quietly. No, I said. But someone did. He hesitated. You should ask Anya where she was yesterday between 2 and 4. Why? Because she wasn't here. Said she had a supplier meeting, but no one's seen the receipts. That was new, and worth a visit. I found Anya in her cramped inventory office, sorting invoices like she was on a mission to alphabetize the universe. I didn't knock. Got a minute? I asked. No, she said, not looking up. That's good, I wasn't asking. I stepped in, leaned on the file cabinet. Danny says you had a mysterious absence yesterday. Something about a supplier? She raised her head slowly. I did. Jessup Farms, they handle our bulk produce. Want to see the order? She pulled out a yellow carbon copy with a flourish and dropped it on the desk like a legal defense. I looked it over. Standard quantities. Eggs weren't even listed. So this trip had nothing to do with the sabotage? I asked. She gave a dry laugh. If I wanted to bring Olivia down, I wouldn't do it with a soufflé. I'd audit her out of a job, fair enough. Still, it was a little too perfect. Anyone else ask you to handle something off the books? Unusual requests? Sudden substitutions? I pressed. No, except Danny begging for heavier cream last week, but that's pastry drama. I left her there and made a call to Wolfe from the alley beside the kitchen. He answered on the second ring. She has an alibi, I said. Paperwork, timestamps. Nothing connects her to the sabotage, but Danny threw shade, and she's not denying she approved the egg swap under pressure. She's too smart to leave a trail, Wolfe said, but if she didn't act alone, who stood to gain from her oversight? I still say Roland. He wants Olivia out. Yes, Wolfe agreed. But his methods are blunt. He lacks the subtlety. That leaves someone close enough to Olivia to know her blind spots and exploit them. You're thinking emotional angle. Exactly, Wolfe said. Ask Olivia who she trusts most, then ask yourself why. I hung up and made my way to her. She was redoing the same garnish for the third time on a beet carpaccio, her jaw set like a stone carving. "You have a minute?" I asked. She nodded toward the hallway and we slipped out of the kitchen. She leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You said you've worked with this team for years," I began. "Who do you trust?" Her eyes flicked up. "That's changed recently." "Because of the sabotage?" "No. Because of what came after." She hesitated. "Danny used to be my strongest ally. I taught him half of what he knows. And now? He's shifted. He wants more spotlight, more autonomy. He didn't want to share pastry duties anymore, said it was time for his own feature menu. Did he threaten to walk?" "Implied it. But Lucian loves him. Instagram likes. Pretty face, flamboyant desserts." "And you blocked him?" She nodded. "He wanted to overhaul the pastry program. I said not yet. He didn't take it well." "That give him motive?" "I didn't think so," she said. "But now, maybe." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was already halfway through his midday beer when I relayed the conversation. "He resented her authority," I said, "and he knew the exact moment she was vulnerable." Wolfe nodded. "And he was in position to act, but there's still something missing." "Like what?" "A signature," Wolfe said. "A saboteur doesn't just destroy. They want to be seen, even if they pretend otherwise. Danny didn't just collapse the soufflé, he left a message. We need to find it." That night I returned to the restaurant. It was slower now. Rain had started and diners were sipping wine like they had nowhere to be. I slipped into the kitchen unnoticed and found Danny reviewing plating sketches near the prep table. "Ever leave a mark on your work?" I asked casually. He looked up. "What do you mean?" "A flair, a twist, something personal." "All chefs do," he said. "Why?" "Because sabotage without a signature is just destruction. But sabotage with a twist?" I leaned in. "That's ego." He didn't answer, but his eyes didn't move from mine. "You used truffle salt in the egg mix," I said. "It wasn't on the list, but Fritz caught the scent when he reheated. To the ramekin. That wasn't in Olivia's recipe." His jaw tightened. "It was a test." "No, it was a message. You wanted her to taste the mistake and know it wasn't hers. You wanted her off balance but not ruined." He swallowed. "She held me back. I deserved more. And you let her collapse in front of a full house. I didn't think it would go that far." "It always does," I said. Back at the brownstone, I laid it out. Wolfe listened, motionless. He didn't want her gone, I concluded. Just shaken. But he overplayed it. Wolfe opened his eyes. "Then it's time to invite them all in and make Danny admit what he already knows. Soufflés aren't the only things that collapse under pressure. You could always tell when—" Wolfe was gearing up for a showdown. He didn't pace, shout, or scribble on chalkboards like a dime store genius. He just got quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind of quiet that made you wonder what gears were turning behind those half-lidded eyes. And that's how it was the morning he told me to call them all in, every last suspect from the soufflé disaster. 4 o'clock, he said, without lifting his gaze from the orchid he was inspecting. "No excuses, no delays. They will come here, and they will sit." "They'll ask why," I said. "You'll tell them I intend to resolve this with precision and without delay. If they refuse, they're finished. Tell Bray I'll make the reason public." That last part made me blink. Wolfe rarely threatened public scandal, mostly because it required him to speak in public. But when he does use it, it works. So I called each one. Olivia came first, then Roland, then Anya. Bray grunted and said he was curious. Danny hesitated for about 5 seconds, too long, before agreeing. By 4, the office looked like a theatrical production, with a cast that hated each other more than the audience. Wolfe sat in his chair behind the desk, fingers steepled, gaze neutral. I stood to the side, notebook ready, though I already knew I wouldn't need to write much. This was going to unfold with a precision Wolfe had already rehearsed in his head a dozen times. "You are all here because a dish failed," Wolfe began, voice smooth, unhurried. "It collapsed when it should have held. That failure was not accidental, it was engineered." A ripple moved across the room. Roland crossed his arms. Anya's lips drew tight. Bray looked amused. Danny blinked once. Olivia just sat there, still and composed, like someone who knew what was coming but had chosen to endure it head-on. Wolfe continued. The tampering was not performed out of spite alone. It was a calculated act, an attempt to unsettle, to shift balance, to send a message. A subtle sabotage designed to appear like an oversight, one blamed on supply issues, miscommunication, or stress. But the signature was there. He turned his head slightly. Fritz found truffle salt in the remains of the failed soufflé. That was when Danny's hands twitched. Just a minor flex of the fingers, but in that moment, it might as well have been a confession scrawled in mustard across the walls. No such ingredient appears in the recipe, Wolfe continued, and no such ingredient was approved for use by Miss Marston, yet it was there, subtle but unmistakable. Wolfe paused. No one spoke. Sabotage, Wolfe said, requires access, intent, and timing. But the person who acted was not merely a saboteur, he was an artist. He didn't just wish to destroy, he wished to be understood, to be recognized, and he wanted the victim to taste that recognition. Danny shifted in his chair. I submit that Danny Kwan altered the eggs, not to ruin the dish completely, but to undermine Olivia's confidence and authority. He introduced truffle salt, knowing its volatility in delicate egg mixtures, knowing it would cause instability, knowing she would blame herself. Danny opened his mouth, then closed it again. Wolfe pressed on, as calm as a man dictating a recipe. His motive was ambition. Olivia blocked his request for a new dessert menu. He saw her as standing in his way, but he didn't want her gone. He wanted her shaken, vulnerable. He wanted room to rise. Still no word from Danny. Anya finally broke the silence. You're serious? He sabotaged the dish with truffle salt? That's his signature? It was never meant for you, Wolfe said. It was meant for her. He nodded to Olivia. And she knew it. The taste told her. Olivia said nothing, but her expression softened. Not vindicated, just confirmed. Wolfe shifted slightly. Mr. Bray, he said, you applied financial pressure to this staff. You created a climate where such sabotage could flourish unnoticed. That does not absolve you. It implicates you, indirectly perhaps, but significantly. Bray's smile was thinner now. I manage a business, not a nursery. If someone snaps under pressure, that's on them. It was not pressure, Wolfe said, but opportunity, and you gave it to him. Finally, Danny cleared his throat. You're making it sound like I poisoned someone. It was just salt. You chose salt that would react poorly with a specific batter, Wolfe replied. You knew how it would behave. That's not carelessness, that's engineering. Danny looked down. I didn't think it would collapse. But it did, Wolfe said. And that collapse was seen, recorded, discussed. It did exactly what you needed. It created doubt. Danny didn't respond. Roland spoke next, voice low. I knew something was wrong, but I thought it was Olivia rushing. I thought she just cracked. Under the pressure, Wolfe glanced at him. You were not wrong. She cracked, but not because of incompetence, because of sabotage, a deliberate nudge, at a moment of pride. Anya let out a breath like a tire losing air. So what now? Wolfe raised an eyebrow. That depends. He looked at Olivia. Do you wish to press charges? She hesitated, then, no, not legally, but he's out. Immediately. Danny stood, pale now. You don't need to do that. You already did, she said flatly. Wolfe's voice was final. Mr. Kwan, your ambition exceeded your ethics. That is not rare, but it is not forgivable. Danny left without another word. Bray looked at Wolfe. You made your point, but I'll still need a new pastry chef. Hire one who prefers recipes to power plays, Wolfe said. Bray left, followed by Anya, then Roland, muttering something about wasted talent and burned bridges. Only Olivia remained. Wolfe turned his head. He admired you. She nodded. No, that's what made it harder. You will recover, Wolfe said. So will your soufflé, she almost smiled. Thank you. After she left, Wolfe leaned back and exhaled slowly. You knew it was Danny the moment you heard about the collapse, I said. No, Wolfe replied. But I suspected when I smelled the truffle. The rest was deduction. He wanted her to taste the betrayal. That is not anger. That is art. You think he'll try it again somewhere else? Wolfe shut his eyes. I think he'll find a stage less tolerant of sabotage. Eventually, even artists must learn restraint. And with that, he reached for his beer. The next morning brought the kind of quiet only a resolved case can offer, at least in the brownstone. Wolfe was back to his regular schedule, which meant precisely no changes. Orchid care from 9 to 11, lunch with Fritz at 1, and an extended bout of literary disdain through the pages of an obscure German monograph on mustard varietals. It was our version of peace. For my part, I was still chewing on the remnants of the case. Not the truffle salt, mind you. That scent was long scrubbed from our kitchen. But the motive. Danny hadn't tried to destroy Olivia's career. He hadn't needed to. All he'd wanted was for her to stumble, to lose just enough confidence to make room for him. And in the end, that made it worse. The cleanest knife wounds are always personal. Wolfe hadn't said a word about Danny since the confrontation. That was his way. When a mind is built to dismantle puzzles, once it's solved one, it discards the pieces. But I wasn't so quick to file the whole affair under closed, because the aftermath still lingered, like the scent of eggs that had gone just slightly off. At 10:15, the phone rang. Wolfe didn't so much as twitch. I answered. Pommes et poivres, said a voice on the other end. This is Olivia Marston. May I speak with Mr. Wolfe? I held the receiver. It's her. Put her through, he said, eyes still on the mustard book. I handed over the line. Miss Marston, Wolfe said, you have questions. Proceed. There was a pause. Then Olivia's voice came through steady and professional, but with something under it, an unease that hadn't been there before. I've been reviewing our kitchen routines, looking for other changes, small shifts I didn't notice until now. Things I chalked up to stress, late deliveries, fatigue. But I think I missed something. Wolfe was quiet. He waited. A few weeks before the soufflé, we had a failed brioche batch, she continued. It collapsed. Fritz might say the same. Too much moisture, not enough tension. I thought it was a mismeasure, but I think it was deliberate. Why would Danny test a failure weeks before the sabotage? Wolfe asked. I think, she said slowly, he was practicing. Wolfe sat up straighter in his chair. He was calibrating. Yes, he had been experimenting with minor sabotage, just enough to mask it as inconsistency. An artist perfecting his method, Wolfe murmured. And, she added, I checked our pantry logs. The truffle salt wasn't ordered by our usual vendor. It was brought in personally by Danny. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Which means he'd been preparing this longer than we thought. I stepped in. Why call us now? If he's gone, what's left? I want to know, she said. How to prevent this again, not just sabotage, the blind spots. I let someone operate beside me, under me, and I didn't see him clearly. Wolfe responded with a rare softness. You saw him, but you dismissed. For the threat because it wore admiration as a disguise. She said nothing, which meant he'd hit the mark. If you seek resilience, he continued, build redundancy. No one hand should carry the fate of a kitchen, even yours. That sat in the air a second longer than it needed to. I understand, she said finally. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. He hung up without ceremony. Then he looked at me. She will recover, he said again. But she will no longer trust applause, that is the cost. I nodded. And Danny? We'll move. We'll adapt. His first mistake was too theatrical, his next will be quieter. You think he'll do it again? I think, Wolfe said. Men like Danny confuse recognition with worth. He believed if he engineered greatness, even through sabotage, he deserved acclaim. When denied, he retaliated. I leaned against the doorway. There's something off about that. In what way? He didn't need to ruin her. He just needed to be noticed. Wolfe nodded once. That is the nature of ego. That afternoon we received a letter. Handwritten, elegant script, signed simply D. No return address. Fritz handed it to Wolfe, who broke the seal and read the two-line message aloud. I never meant for it to collapse entirely. I only wanted her to see what she was keeping from me. No confession, no apology. Just clarity, the kind that stings sharper than any courtroom sentence. Wolfe set it aside without expression. I kept looking at it. You think he's trying to justify it? I asked. No, Wolfe said. He's trying to finish the dish. A chef never leaves a plate incomplete. The brownstone returned to its rhythms. Fritz prepared a lemon soufflé 2 days later. Wolfe didn't comment on the symmetry, but he did eat the whole thing slowly, silently, and without a word of criticism. The quiet in the brownstone that week wasn't emptiness. It was recalibration. The sound of gears returning to position after a minor but intentional misalignment. Wolfe didn't call it justice, he never did. For him, the victory wasn't in punishment. It was in understanding, and for me, I still couldn't stop thinking about that signature move, the truffle salt. Not because it was clever, but because it was small, almost invisible. That's how ambition works sometimes. It doesn't knock the door down, it slips in through the pantry and rewrites the recipe. Olivia had learned that the hard way. Wolfe had seen it coming. And Danny, wherever he was now, had left behind more than a sunken soufflé. He'd left a warning. "Tell me something," I asked Wolfe that evening as Fritz brought in a chilled raspberry mousse. "Yes?" he said without looking up. "If he hadn't used truffle salt, if he'd been just a little more careful, would you still have caught him?" Wolfe tapped his spoon twice against the glass, then finally said, "Eventually. The guilty always season their guilt with something they believe is invisible. But nothing is tasteless when you know how to detect it." So I nodded and reached for my spoon. Outside, the city moved on, fast, loud, and distracted. Inside, the brownstone was calm again, and the soufflé, I'm happy to report, held firm. A week passed, maybe more. In our line of work, time doesn't tick. It simmers. Wolfe spent those days comfortably marinating in his routines while I pretended to do the same. But the case still lingered in the back of my head, like a tune I couldn't quite hum out. It had ended, publicly, cleanly, neatly. But there was something about it that hadn't settled. Wolfe never liked loose ends, but I liked them even less when they pretended to be tied off. And Danny Kwan's saboteur-turned-misguided artist had left one, that handwritten letter. It bothered me. Too polished. Too deliberate. The man who'd risked everything over a truffle-salted soufflé had just walked away. Without more, then came the call. "Archie Goodwin?" the voice asked. Male, clipped, the tone of a man who double-checks locks and lies. Depends who's asking. "This is Officer Kearns, Midtown South. You handled an incident involving pommes et poivre." "Among other things," I said. "Why?" "We've had a complaint filed by Olivia Marston. Says she's received 3 anonymous deliveries in the last 10 days. First was a bag of spoiled flour. Second was an envelope with eggshells. Third, a ramekin filled with mold." I went. Quiet. Not because I was shocked, because I wasn't. "Any notes?" I asked. "No words, just packaging. No fingerprints either. But she said to call you, said you'd understand." "I do," I said. Wolfe was at his desk when I returned, halfway through a paragraph on saffron cultivation. I didn't wait to be asked. "Danny's still playing games," I said. "Olivia's getting deliveries, spoiled ingredients, symbolic. Petty and completely in line with what we know." Wolfe didn't look up. "He wants her unnerved." "Yes," I said. "And he wants us to know it." Wolfe shut the book. That was as close as he got to alarm. "Then he's not finished," he said. And we misjudged his restraint. We sat for a moment in the quiet, Wolfe thinking, me watching him think. Then he said, "Call Olivia. Tell her she is not to touch or discard the next delivery. She is to photograph it, bag it, and notify us immediately." "She's not going to like being watched," I said. "She is already being watched," Wolfe replied. "The difference is whether the observer is a threat or a shield." I made the call. Olivia agreed, though her tone made it clear she wasn't happy to be roped back into a chess game she thought had ended. 2 days later, it arrived, a sealed glass jar. Inside, burnt meringue. The smell was faint, but unmistakable. Lemon zest, singed sugar, and something else, something chemical. She followed Wolfe's instructions, bagged it, photographed it, then dropped it at the brownstone, hands trembling slightly as she passed it to me in the vestibule. "Do I need protection?" she asked. "No," I said. "You need patience. He's provoking, not striking." Wolfe examined the jar that evening. He had Fritz place it on a tray and leave it on the windowsill to reduce its stench. Then he turned to me. "He is escalating," Wolfe said, But not toward violence. He is creating a narrative. Of what? Of rejection, Wolfe said. Of injustice. He feels misunderstood. So he constructs a fable where he is the genius ignored, the prophet discarded. That doesn't end with burnt sugar, I said. No, Wolfe said. It ends with spectacle. That night I couldn't sleep. The city outside buzzed like it always did, but I couldn't shake the thought that Danny wasn't just sending messages. He was building towards something final, something symbolic. I just didn't know what, until I got a call the next morning at 6:30, which is a criminal hour unless someone's bleeding or baking. It was Olivia again. There's been a break-in, she said. At the restaurant. They didn't steal anything, but they left something. I was in a cab within 5 minutes. Wolfe had already declined to come along, citing his usual distaste for scenes of hysteria and fluorescent lighting. When I arrived, 2 uniforms were taping off the side door. No signs of forced entry, but there was a trail, egg whites smeared like paint across the prep table, and in the center of it a white chef's hat, folded neatly, a single note underneath, 4 words. You never saw me. I showed it to Wolfe an hour later. He barely glanced at it. He's declaring erasure, he said. Not rage, not vengeance. He wants her to regret never understanding him. He broke in just to say goodbye. Yes, Wolfe said, and to reclaim his role as the unacknowledged artist. He's written the ending. Now he disappears. You think that's the last of it? I asked. For now, Wolfe said. Men like him require witnesses. He knows he's being watched. That tempers him for a time. I leaned against the office wall. You know what I hate most about this? Enlighten me. He got what he wanted. Not a job, not a claim, but attention. The one thing he said Olivia never gave him. Wolfe nodded. Attention is the currency of the discontented. You want me to notify the police? I asked. No, Wolfe said. There's no crime left to solve, just an echo. And echoes fade. And just like that, the brownstone resumed its rhythm again. Fritz returned to his roulades. Wolfe returned to his reading. I returned to wondering when the next case would walk through the door. Hopefully one that didn't smell like sabotage. But I kept that note, the one Danny left on the prep table. I didn't tell Wolfe. I slid it into a drawer in my desk next to a stub of a pencil and a card from a blackjack dealer in Reno. It didn't mean anything, not really. But sometimes the things you keep aren't for closure. They're just reminders that not every dish served cold is revenge. Sometimes it's regret. Sometimes it's ego. And sometimes it's just burnt meringue. You'd think a week without fresh sabotage would calm things down. But the truth is, quiet can be just as unnerving. At the brownstone, we were back to what passed for normal. Wolfe, barely speaking more than a sentence at a time, unless it involved lunch. Fritz rotating menus with seasonal obsession, and me filing reports that no one reads unless they're prepping for cross-examination. But under all that routine, something still felt off. It wasn't the case itself. That was technically solved. Danny had revealed himself in pieces. Sabotage here, symbolism there, a signature dish of ego garnished with insecurity. He'd made his exit dramatic enough to feel final. But Wolfe didn't mark it finished, not officially. The file sat open on his desk, not quite closed, not quite active. Just there, and then it wasn't. I noticed it one afternoon when I brought in the mail, mostly catalogues Wolfe would never order from, and 2 letters from a Vermont cheesemonger who thought Wolfe might enjoy artisanal butter with notes of seaweed. When I dropped the stack on the desk, I saw the folder was gone. Not filed, not stacked, gone. Where's the Quan file? I asked. Wolfe didn't look up. Removed. Why? I asked. You're done with it. Temporarily. Now, Wolfe doesn't use words like temporarily unless he's playing chess with fate. I sat across from him and folded my hands the way he hated, just to see if I could provoke something. Nothing. You think he's coming back? I asked. Wolfe sighed. No, I think he wants us to believe he won't. I didn't push it. He'd closed the file, but not the door. 2 days later, I got a call from someone I didn't expect. Lucian Bray. Mr. Goodwin, he said, voice like an elevator. At the Waldorf, smooth, mechanical, going nowhere fast. I'd like a moment of your time. That's rare, I said. You usually prefer your moments to belong to other people. He didn't bite. I'd like to meet. Today. Privately. You want Wolfe too? No. Just you. That was strange enough to make it worth the trip. He met me at his private club on the Upper East Side. Leather chairs, crystal decanters, and the smell of entitlement baked into the wallpaper. Bray was seated near the window, looking out like he was thinking about conquering something. I'll be brief, he said. Someone left a note in my car last night. That got my attention. No sign of forced entry. The note was placed on the dash. No envelope. Just a folded piece of kitchen parchment. What did it say? He pulled it from his jacket and handed it to me. 4 words, familiar script. Still seasoning the truth, I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. I assume you recognize the handwriting, he said. Yeah, I said. I do. He poured himself a drink. Didn't offer me one. I'm not interested in pressing charges, he said, but I am interested in knowing what he wants. Wolfe's voice echoed in my head from days earlier. He's writing a fable. He wants you to remember, I said. That he knows how this started, and how it almost ended differently. Bray frowned. I gave him nothing but opportunity. You gave him pressure. He turned it into performance. That's how people like Danny work. They take your expectations and fold them into resentment. He snorted. You sound like Wolfe. I work with him every day. Eventually it gets in your bloodstream. I left without touching the brandy. Back at the brownstone, I handed Wolfe the parchment. He read it once, then set it aside. He's not done, I said. He is, Wolfe said. But he wants witnesses. Why Bray? Wolfe leaned back in his chair. Because Bray thinks he's the top of the pyramid. Danny wants him to feel like a footnote. It's not revenge, it's commentary. He's writing a story without words. Exactly, Wolfe said. Each gesture, each object, each line, he's shaping the legacy. I sat down. So what now? Do we wait for him to send one to you? No, Wolfe said. He won't. I understood him. He has no need to remind me. But me? I asked. He might. Yes, Wolfe said. Because you were the one who saw him. That sat in the room like an uninvited guest. The next day I found a small package addressed to me. No postmark, no return address, just Archie Goodwin scrawled in neat ink. Inside, a spoon, not silver, not expensive, just a plain kitchen spoon. The kind you'd use to stir a soufflé base before folding in egg whites, wrapped in parchment. On the handle engraved faintly. You almost missed it. Wolfe read the inscription and didn't blink. He's not angry. No? No, Wolfe said. He's pleased. You noticed the truffle. That's what mattered to him. He thinks. We shared the moment, I said. You did, Wolfe said. That was the performance. You were the audience. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was applause turned backward. He's gone now, Wolfe said. You're sure? Yes, the story's done. He stood, stretched, and moved toward the dining room. As he passed me, he added, Wash the spoon before Fritz sees it. He'll think you've been cooking. That night, I tucked the spoon into the drawer with the rest of Danny's trail. The note, the picture of the ramekin, the burned meringue sketch Olivia sent over. None of it criminal, none of it provable, but all of it real. That's the thing about cases like this. There's no courtroom, no charges. Just proof that the human ego can rise higher than any soufflé and collapse just as easily. And somewhere out there, Danny Kwan was walking into a new kitchen, wearing a new name, tasting every bite he made for signs of recognition. But I knew the truth. And Wolfe, he already knew how it ended. Dinner that evening was chestnut-stuffed quail with a delicate glaze of Calvados, followed by a citrus tart that Fritz had warned was too subtle for the impatient. Wolfe, naturally, was not impatient. He ate as if nothing unusual had ever crossed his plate or his mind. But I knew better. He was letting the flavor settle before making his final observation. Always the slowest chew before the sharpest sentence. You've kept the spoon? Wolfe asked me after Fritz had retreated to the kitchen. I nodded. It's in my drawer. You intend to keep it? Why not? I said. It's not evidence. Not anymore. No, Wolfe agreed. It's something worse, sentiment. I leaned back. You think I'm getting soft? I think, Wolfe said, wiping the corner of his mouth with the linen napkin, that the line between fascination and indulgence is thin. You are curious by nature, but curiosity untethered can become admiration. I didn't answer that, not because he was wrong, but because he wasn't entirely right either. What do you call what Danny did? I asked. Was it sabotage? Art? A cry for help? Wolfe leaned back in his chair. It was compulsion, the need to be seen, and the belief that causing a collapse is easier than building a triumph. He was talented, I said. Yes, Wolfe admitted, but talent unmoored from discipline is merely chaos with flair. That stuck with me. We didn't talk about Danny for a few days after that. The phone calls from Olivia stopped. Bray went quiet. No more notes, no more symbols. No more soufflés sent to Sank. But then, as I was organizing the last of the files, Wolfe gestured toward his desk. Add it to the closed cases, he said. You're sure? I asked. Yes, he replied. It's over. I slid the folder into its place in the cabinet, just above the case of the vanishing cookbook and right below the caviar switch. Every case had a strange name, and every case had a strange truth, but this one had stuck differently. It wasn't a murder, no stolen diamond, no blackmail scheme, just a soufflé that didn't rise and a man who needed to. A week later, Olivia sent over a gift. No card. Just a box of fresh farm eggs, beautiful uniform marked with her kitchen seal. There was one oddity. The carton only held 11. I brought it into Wolfe's office. Missing one, I said. He glanced inside. Symbolism. For what? For restraint, Wolfe said. I nodded. She's fine now, confident, back in control. Yes, Wolfe said, because she was tested and passed. I wanted to believe it was over, really over, but part of me kept glancing at that spoon. Part of me wondered where Danny was now, if he'd changed his name, traded in his apron for something less combustible, or if he was already working in another kitchen, drawing up another menu of minor sabotage, one egg at a time. But Wolfe, for once, was certain. He won't return, he said, one morning over breakfast. Not here. You really believe that? Yes, he said. He finished his performance, he achieved his goal to leave an impression, and he did. That's not justice, I said. No, Wolfe agreed, but justice is often irrelevant to the performer. He didn't want punishment, he wanted a legacy. And what about Olivia? She's stronger, Wolfe said. She's wary now, but still capable. The kitchen will recover. So will she. But she'll never fully trust applause again. Good, I said. Neither should we. Later that week, Fritz tried a new soufflé recipe. Not a lemon one. Not anything that might remind Wolfe, or me, of what came before. It was chocolate, dark and precise, baked to perfection. Wolfe ate it slowly, no comment. But I watched him for the flicker, the almost invisible moment when the center held firm and the rise stayed true. He noticed it. He always does. After dessert, I stepped into my office and opened the drawer again. The spoon was still there, still cold, still plain. I held it for a moment, felt its weight, then placed it back beside the note. I didn't need to throw it away. I didn't need to display it either. It had served its purpose. Wolfe passed my door and paused. Still holding on to the past? No, I said, just remembering the flavor. He grunted. Be sure not to confuse it with nostalgia. I won't, I said. I'm more of a savory guy anyway. That night the brownstone was silent. Wolfe went back to his orchids. I went back to the files. The world outside kept moving. Chefs rose and fell. Restaurants opened and closed. Egos inflated and burst. But inside these walls, we knew the truth. Not every case ends with a headline. Sometimes it ends with a lesson. Souffle is delicate, but ambition is even more so. Handle either without care and something is bound to collapse.